and welcome. Hi, Twitch and YouTube. I hope all of you are doing well. And hello, Tiki Toki. And I don't think anyone is on Discord. Yeah, so how is everybody? How are y'all doing? Is everything okay? Sorry, I'm getting a lot of messages. Ooh. Okay. So we are finally. It has been a while, but we are finally on part 2 of chapter 3 of Orientalism. And the last time we read was more than a month ago, before I got sick. So just please keep on tippity tapping the screen. Please share out the live. And remember, I do the readings for free. So let's see if we can meet this goal, because, yeah, me too. I have missed the readings because throughout these past few weeks, I have not felt a sense of purpose. And this kind of gives me more of a sense of purpose than, you know. But yeah, let's get into it. So we finished part 1 more than a month ago. And part 1 is Orientalism now, where he goes into back in the 70s when this was written, what Orientalism looked like then. So we go deeper into the modern setting and go into style, expertise, vision, Orientalism's worldliness. And just this morning, somebody said the Near East. I almost lost my shit. I was like, wait, why are you talking about the Near East? This is not just an Orientalist term. It's outdated. It is racist. It's colonial. Like, why are we still doing this today? And he's like, oh no, but that's the term I learned at university. Why are universities still teaching about West Asia as the Near East? It drives me fucking nuts. But here we are. So this book was first written in the 1970s. Let me get the exact date. First published in 1978. So this is the context in which we find Edward Saïd. As he appears in several poems, in novels like Kim, and in too many catchphrases to be ironic fiction, Kipling's white man, as an idea, a persona, a style of being, seems to have served many Britishers while they were abroad. And if you have heard me talk about Rudyard Kipling, if you have spent any extended amount of time with me, you've heard me talk about how much I hate Rudyard Kipling and how much I love the Just So stories. Because I love the Just So stories. They are absolutely fantastic. In fact, I have a first edition of the Just So stories. But fuck Rudyard Kipling. Thank you, Chris. Fuck Kipling. And I will read you something about the white man's burden in a little bit. If I remember, because remembering is not my strong suit these days. The actual color of their skin set them off dramatically and reassuringly from the sea of natives. But for the Britisher who circulated amongst Indians, Africans, or Arabs, there was also a certain knowledge that he belonged to or could draw upon the empirical and spiritual reserves of a long tradition of executive responsibility toward what was called the colored races. It was this tradition, glories, difficulties, that Kipling wrote what he celebrated the road taken by white men in the colonies. And this is from the poem The White Man's Burden. Now, this is the road that the white men tread when they go to when they go to clean a land. Just the language in itself, to clean a land. Like, it's not clean until they get there. Bitch, what? Iron underfoot and vine overhead, and deep on either hand. We have trod that road, the wet and windy road, our chosen star for guide. Oh, well the world when the white men tread the highway side by side. And of course, Saïd doesn't skip a beat here. Cleaning a land is best done by white men in delicate concert with each other, an allusion to the present dangers of European rivalry in the colonies, for failing in the attempt to coordinate policy. Kipling's white men are quite prepared to go to war. Freedom for ourselves and freedom for our sons, and failing freedom, war. Behind the white man's mask of amiable leadership, there is always the express willingness to use force, to kill, and to be killed. What dignifies his mission is a sense of intellectual dedication. He is a white man, but not for mere profit, since his chosen star presumably sits far above earthly gain. He's talking about the star that guided the three wise men in this context. Certainly, many white men often wondered what it is they fought for on that wet and windy road, and certainly a great number of them must have been puzzled as to how the color of their skin gave them superior ontological status, plus great power over much of the inhabited world. Yet in the end, being a white man for Kipling, and for those whose perceptions and rhetoric he influenced, was a self-confirming business. One became a white man because one was white. More important, drinking that cup, living that unalterable destiny in the white man's day left one little time for idle speculation on the origins, causes, and historical logic. Being a white man, therefore, was an idea and a reality. It involved a reasoned position toward both white and non-white worlds. It meant, in the colonies, speaking in a certain way, behaving according to a code of regulations, and feeling certain things and not others, or being completely unfeeling at all in some cases. It meant specific judgments, evaluations, gestures. It was a form of authority before which non-whites and even white people themselves were expected to bend. In the institutional forms it took, like colonial governments, consular corps, commercial establishments, it was an agency for the expression, diffusion, and implementation of policy toward the world. And within this agency, although a certain personal latitude was allowed, the white man, in short, was a concrete character, in manner of being in the world, a way of taking hold of reality, language, and thought. And this made a specific style possible. Now, what I was saying yesterday about the law having been written for the elite, by the elite, and not protecting people. It was never meant to protect people. This is that idea taken a little further outwards in saying, when you look at all of the policies that were instituted by colonialism, it was there to benefit the white man. So when people say, oh, without colonialism, you would be living in mud huts, I would say I would gladly take the mud huts over everything that colonialism did to our people, if that is the case. But if we have to go back to mud huts to get you out of here, then we'll gladly take all our stuff back. Thank you. And see how they start crying. Because they don't know. I don't know if they don't know, or they refuse to acknowledge that everything that the West has is stolen from us. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think they know and they just refuse to acknowledge it? Or do you think they just don't know at all? Like Arundhati Roy was saying yesterday, that people are purposely uneducated, especially in the US. Look, Chris, I finished half this bottle today. Yeah, I'm also inclined to think to say that they're unaware. I don't think British people are unaware, because they are very well taught about the conquering British Empire. But in the US, I wouldn't be surprised if they just didn't know. Wa alaikum salam, Khitam. Kipling himself could not merely have happened. The same is true of his white man. Such ideas and their authors emerge out of complex historical and cultural circumstances, at least two of which have much in common with the history of Orientalism in the 19th century. One of them is the culturally sanctioned habit of deploying large generalizations by which reality is divided into various collectives: language, race, type, color, mentality, and each category being not so much a neutral designation as an evaluative interpretation. So the way I speak is being evaluated in terms of whiteness, in terms of what colonialism set as the norm. So if somebody hears me speak without seeing my face, they would say, oh, that is an educated person. That is well, they would assume, thank you, they would assume an educated woman. And as soon as, like, I've had this before where I've spoken on a live and white men have actually listened to me because they've assumed that I'm white because of my accent. And as soon as I put my camera on, everything I say is wrong. Because they are judging me by the metric of whiteness. They are judging my accent. They are judging what I, not just what I say, but how I say it. They are judging my my cadence. Oh, skip. Okay. You can go bye-bye. Underlying these categories is the rigidly binomial opposition of ours and theirs, with the former always encroaching upon the latter, even to the point of making theirs exclusively a function of ours. If something did not benefit empire, it was destroyed completely. This opposition was reinforced not only by anthropology, linguistics, and history, but also, of course, by the Darwinian thesis on survival and natural selection, and no less decisive, by the rhetoric of high cultural humanism. Fuck Darwin too, just by the way. The whole idea of survival of the fittest was one of the cornerstones of whiteness, and how whiteness asserted itself as a quote-unquote superior entity or existence. What gave writers like Renan and Arnold the right to generalities about race was the official character of their formed cultural literacy. Our values were, let us say, liberal, humane, correct. They were supported by the tradition of the beautiful letters, les belles lettres, informed scholarship, rational inquiry, as Europeans, and white men, the quote-unquote we, shared in them every time their virtues were extolled. Nevertheless, the human partnerships formed by reiterated cultural values excluded as much as they included. For every idea about our art, spoken for by Arnold, Ruskin, Mill, Newman, Carlyle, Renan, Gobineau, or Comte, another link in the chain binding us together was formed, while another outsider was banished. When people say that Amitabh Bachchan, okay, I don't really like him as a person, but as an actor, he's phenomenal. When people say that Amitabh Bachchan is the Donald Sutherland, is Bollywood's Donald Sutherland, I'm like, no. Absolutely the fuck not. Somebody said that, and I'm like, whatever gave you that idea? Amitabh Bachchan is a far more prolific actor than Donald Sutherland ever was. And ever will be. Okay, my feet are really, really cold today. It is said to be the coldest night of the year so far. Yeah, my feet are so cold. And if my feet are cold, that means the whole of me is cold. Rabindranath Tagore, also an Indian writer, is called the Shakespeare of India. Shakespeare took from existing law and turned them into plays. Rabindranath Tagore, his writing is still etched into poetry that we use today. His turn of phrase, far more interesting and requires so much more thought. He's not Shakespeare. Shakespeare will never be Rabindranath Tagore. Even if this is always the result of such rhetoric, wherever and whenever it occurs, we must remember that for 19th century Europe, an imposing edifice of learning and culture was built, so to speak, in the face of actual outsiders, the colonies, the poor, the quote-unquote delinquent, whose role in the culture was to give definition of what they were constitutionally unsuited for. And that is why we say that the us and them came first. It didn't always, and it didn't start with the genocides. It started with the us and them. And yet we still center the white man. Exactly. There's only one portrait of Shakespeare, though. Only one that ever existed in his lifetime. That was ever done in his lifetime. And it seems to suggest that he was not all that white. But how he was, so if he wasn't, how he was co-opted into whiteness. Why did he write so sympathetically of Othello in a time when the idea of the peanut gallery existed? Okay, I need to put on my bedroom slippers. Is there anybody on Twitch or YouTube? You can say hi, but I am going to step away from the computer for a few minutes. But yeah, this idea of co-opting, seeing, these norms, these what we consider to be high culture, these norms of what we know to be civilization, these ideas of practicality, technology. It was all measured against what Europe was doing. And if it was found that a colony had done it before them, or had already advanced past that point, they destroyed that knowledge. Isn't it a curious thought that China invented gunpowder? Gunpowder, one of the most destructive things on the planet, that has been used as the most destructive thing for humanity. Gunpowder was invented by the Chinese, not to kill people, but to make fireworks, to make things of beauty. What did the Europeans use it for? To kill people. Centuries before Europe claimed to discover gunpowder, the Chinese were using it for art, to create joy, and Europeans used it to destroy. And that is one of the most telling things about the intentions of empire. Families in Palestine, generation after generation, have been tending to the same olive trees, some up to 800 years old. Families have been tending to olive trees. And in less than 50 years, Israel destroyed more than 50% of the olive plantations in Palestine. Therein lies the stark difference between people who are connected to the land and people who think they own it. Yes or no? Ecocide is not a thing that the indigenous people do. Biodiversity of Palestine has been decimated. And that to me when they say that they're greening the desert, what they mean is they're Europeanizing. They're not greening the desert. Hi, JJ. Hi, Cuddle. JJ, I came into your life just as you ended earlier. But then the colonizer decided suitable for and co-opted it. The other circumstance common to the creation of the white man and Orientalism is the quote unquote field commanded by each, as well as the sense that such a field entails particular modes, even rituals, of behavior, learning, and ultimately possession. Oh, hello, wifey. Only an Occidental could speak of Orientals, for example, just as it was the white man who could designate the name of, quotes, coloreds or non-whites. And I think he uses these terms very deliberately because in all of Saïd's other writing, he never negates another person's existence unless it is speaking as the colonizer. Every statement made by Orientalists or white men, who were usually interchangeable, conveyed a sense of the irreducible distance separating white from colored or Occidental from Oriental. Behind each statement, there resonated the tradition of experience, learning, and education that kept the Oriental colored to this position of object studied by the Occidental white, instead of vice versa, never vice versa. Where one was in the position of power, as Chroma was, for example, the Oriental belonged to a system of rule whose principle was simply to make sure that no Oriental was ever allowed to be independent, to rule himself. The premise here was that since the Orientals were ignorant of self-government, they had better be kept that way for their own good. And this was one of the pretenses of colonialism. We need to rule these people for their own good, but we need to take their resources too. Since the white man, like the Orientalist, lived close to the line of tension keeping coloreds at bay, he felt it incumbent upon himself readily to define and redefine the domain he surveyed. Passages of narrative description regularly alternate with passages of re-articulated definition and judgment that disrupt the narrative. This is a characteristic style of writing produced by Oriental experts who operated using Kipling's white man as a mask. Here is T.E. Lawrence writing to V.W. Richards in 1918. The Arab appealed to my imagination. It is the old civilization which has redefined itself clear of household gods, and half the trappings which ours hasten to assume. The gospel of bareness in materials is a good one, and it involves apparently a sort of moral bareness too. Ugh. They think for the moment and endeavor to slip through life without turning corners or climbing hills. In part, it is a mental and moral fatigue, a race trained out to avoid difficulties. They have to jettison so much that we think honorable and grave, and yet without in any way sharing their point of view. I think I can understand it enough to look at myself and other foreigners from their direction, and without condemning it. The fuck? I remember reading this the first time and I was like, excuse me? I know I am a stranger to them and will always be, but I cannot believe them worse any more than I could change to their ways. He's essentially calling them undesirable. A similar perspective, however different the subject matter under discussion may seem to be, is found in the remarks by Gertrude Bell. Quote, "How many thousands years the state of things has lasted, namely that Arabs live in a state of war. Those who shall read the earliest records of the inner desert would tell us, for it goes back to the first of them. But in all the centuries of the Arab, they have brought no wisdom from experience." Really? Really? What are vaccinations? He is never safe, yet he behaves as though security were his daily bread. The people that he's not safe from is the European. Thank you so much, Messi. To which, as a gloss, we should add further observation, this time about life in Damascus. I begin to see dimly what the civilization of the great eastern city means, how they live, what they think. I have gone out to terms with them, but I believe the fact of my being English is a great help. We have gone up in the world since 5 years ago, and the difference is marked. I think this is due to the success of our government in Egypt to a great extent. That government was not a success. The defeat of Russia stands for a great deal, and my impression is that the vigorous policy of Lord Curzon in the Persian Gulf and on the Indian frontier stands for a great deal more. No one who does not know the East can realize how it all hangs together. It is scarcely an exaggeration to say that if the English mission had been turned back at the gates of Kabul, the English tourists would be frowned upon in the streets of Damascus. They were always frowned upon. Like, bitch, what are you talking about? The cognitive dissonance that we see now with people who refuse to acknowledge what is truly going on with neocolonialism, with the rise of fascism in the West. This is it. It is the same flavor of cognitive dissonance, just different packaging. In such statements as these, we note immediately that the Arab or Arabs have an aura of apartness, finiteness, definiteness, and collective self-consistency, such as to wipe out any traces of the individual with narratable life histories. Because only whiteness is afforded individuality. Everybody else is a homogeneous collective. What appeared to Lawrence's imagination was the clarity of the Arab both as image and supposed philosophy or attitude towards life. In both cases, what Lawrence fastens on is the Arab as if seen from the cleansing perspective of one not an Arab, and for one whom such unself-conscious primitive simplicity, such as the Arab, possesses, is something defined only by the observer, in this case, the white man. Our existence has always been defined in relation to whiteness. We go back to Fanon. We cannot extricate ourselves from whiteness because the definition of race was defined in relation to whiteness. Yet Arab refinement, which in its essentials corresponds to Yeats's visions of Byzantium, were flames that no F-slur feeds, flint nor steel has lit, nor storm disturbs, flames begotten of flame, where blood-begotten spirits come, and all complexity of fury leaves. This is associated with Arab pendurability, as if the Arab had not been subject to the ordinary processes of history. And we go back to chapter 1, where he talks about Orientalism fixing Arab identity and the Oriental in a moment in history, rather than a changing and evolving society. Paradoxically, the Arab seems to Lawrence to have exhausted himself in his very temporal persistence. The enormous age of Arab civilization has thus served to refine the Arab down to his quintessential attributes, and to tire him out morally in the process. What we are left with is Bell's Arab, centuries of experience and no wisdom. As a collective entity, then, the Arab accumulates no existential or even semantical thickness. He remains the same, fixed in history. Except for the exhausting refinements mentioned by Lawrence, from one end to the other of the records of the inner desert. We are to assume that if an Arab feels joy, if he is sad at the death of a child or parent, if he has a sense of injustice, of political tyranny, those experiences are necessarily subordinate to the sheer unadorned and persistent fact of being an Arab. And that is the whole idea of racism right there. That there are races that are morally and intellectually inferior, which we know is untrue. But this is what the white man sees as his burden, according to Rudyard Kipling. To elevate the uncivilized man from his uneducated and immoral position in the world. The primitiveness of such a state exists simultaneously on at least two levels. One, in the definition, which is reductive, and two, according to Lawrence and Bell at least, in reality. This absolute coincidence was itself no simple coincidence. For one, it could only have been made from the outside by virtue of a vocabulary and epistemological instrument designed both to get to the heart of things and to avoid the distractions of accident, circumstance, or experience. So that what they're saying is, yes, if we ignore history, this is the truth. Isn't that what imperialism still does today? Like, no, you can't look at it that way. No, ignore the past however many years. Ignore everything that happened from 1948 to the 7th of October 2023. For another, the coincidence was a fact uniquely the result of method, tradition, and politics working together. Each, in a sense, obliterated the distractions between type, the Oriental, the Semite, the Arab, the Orient, and ordinary human reality, Yeats's uncontrollable mystery on the bestial floor, in which all human beings live. The scholarly investigator took a type marked Oriental for the same thing as any individual Oriental that he might encounter. Years of tradition had encrusted discourse about such matters as the Semitic or Oriental spirit with some legitimacy, and political good sense taught, in Bell's marvelous phrase, that in the East it all hangs together. Primitiveness, therefore, inherited in the Orient was the Orient, an idea to which anyone dealing with or writing about the Orient had to return, as if to a touchstone outlasting time or experience or evolution. And I'm not talking about just biological evolution. I'm talking about evolution of humanity, evolution of society, evolution as a whole. There's an excellent way of understanding all this as it applied to the white agents, experts, and advisors for the Orient. What mattered to Lawrence and Bell was that their references to Arabs or Orientals belonged to a recognizable and authoritative convention or formulation, one that was able to subordinate detail to it. But from where, more particularly, did the Arab, the Semite, or the Oriental come? We have remarked upon how, during the late 19th century, in such writers as Renan, Lane, Flaubert, Cossin de Perceval, Marx, and Lamartine, a generalization about the Orient drew its power from the presumed representativeness of everything Oriental. Each particle of the Orient told of its Orientalness, so much so that the attribute of being Oriental overrode any countervailing instance. An Oriental man was first Oriental, and only second a man. And we see race immediately. Before I am anything else, I am brown. Before anything after being brown, I am femme. I am seen as a woman. And we have the hierarchy of what matters to the white man. His race, gender, and then they will look at how I'm dressed, how I speak, and therefore class. And now we see it all coming together. Whew. Any questions? I have not been looking at Discord. Please let me know if the foot heater is too loud. My feet are so fucking cold. Such radical typing was naturally reinforced by pseudoscience, or discourse, as I prefer to call it, that took a backward and downward direction towards the species category, which was supposed to be an ontogenic explanation for every member of our species. Thus, within broad, semi-popular designations such as Oriental, there were some more scientifically valid distinctions being made, based principally on language, Semitic, Dravidic, Hamitic, quickly able to acquire anthropological, psychological, biological, and cultural evidence in their support. Because a lot of what these classifications divided. Yes, it is fine for you, Chris. Because there was a smidge of truth to some of these classifications. Yes, that is a Semitic language. Yes, that is a Dravidian language. That is different from this. And there's absolutely an essence of truth to it. They were able to get away with the pseudoscience of moral and intellect in racial classifications. And it is so, thank you, Chris, it's so reductive and anti-humanist. But we go back to Kipling and his claim that it was humanity that they were bringing to the uncivilized. No, what they were actually doing was stripping humanity away from it. Stripping humanity away from us and assigning all definitions and all characteristics of what they regarded as humanity to themselves. Renowned Semitic as an instance was a linguistic generalization which in Renan's hands could add itself to all sorts of parallel ideas, from anatomy to history, anthropology, and even geology. Semitic could then be employed not only as a simple description or designation, it could be applied to any complex of historical and political events in order to pare them down to a nucleus, both antecedent and inherent. Semitic, therefore, was a trans-temporal, trans-individual category, purporting to predict every discrete act of Semitic behavior on the basis of some pre-existing Semitic essence, aiming as well to interpret all aspects of human life and activity in terms of some common Semitic element. It angers me. It angers me so much that this tyranny over our own identities is so heavily baked into how we see our own identities today. The peculiar hold on late 19th century liberal European culture of such relatively punitive ideas will seem mysterious unless it is remembered that the appeal of sciences like linguistics, anthropology, and biology was that they were empirical and by no means speculative or idealistic. Or so they said. We know that what they considered empirical evidence was circular logic. And a lot of it was because I fucking said so. Hello. How are you? Are you cold? I'm cold.
Big cold room, the door open, window open.
I don't got the window open.
I didn't even knock. I'm going to bed.
Are you tired?
You just had 2 cups.
No. It's empty.
That's not my problem.
It's got a hole in it.
That's a you problem.
Thank you, my love.
I'll just take you to the kitchen.
Thank you, my love.
Go away.
I love you.
No.
You're handsome.
No.
You got such pretty eyelashes. He really does have pretty eyelashes. Oh, that's my husband. He's a grouch, but he's got really pretty eyelashes. Clearly, clearly. Welcome in everybody who's here. I don't know if people are on Twitch or YouTube, but The reasoning of because I fucking said so is essentially what was done throughout the colonized world. Renowned Semitic like Bob's Indo-European was a constructed object. It's true, but it was considered logical and inevitable as a protoform, given the scientifically apprehendable and empirically analyzable data of the Semitic languages. I don't like the puzzle piece thing. So, based on something as simple as language that also evolves over time, by the way, because what is considered a Semitic language? It is a language from the Semitic area of what the West knows as the Middle East, right? Arabic is a Semitic language. Actually, I'm going to discuss this on the server because I need to wrap my mind around the thought here. Yeah, I'll discuss it on the Discord server. Because Indo-European wasn't a thing until Europeans matched it together and said, it's Indo-European, because they realized that India had so many great inventions, they had to co-opt us. Thus, in trying to formulate a prototypical and primitive linguistic type, as well as cultural, psychological, and historical, there was also an attempt to define the primary human potential out of which completely specific instances of behavior uniformly derived. Thank you. I love you. Please take your yelly son. So, out of something as simple as a language group. What? Out of something as simple as a language group comes a set of behaviors, history. Yes, language holds history. Yes, language holds a lot of things. How we speak comes from the language we speak, how expressive it is. All of those kinds of things, like a lot of... Anytime you hear any of our friends speaking Arabic, you will notice how certain behaviors change, how tone of voice changes, how body language changes. Yes, there's all of these things, but it is not a moral judgment. And it is not a judgment, it is not a reason for judging intellectual ability. Hey, I missed you today. Well, I miss you whenever I don't see you. But, you know, I didn't see you today. When moral and intellectual value is placed on something such as language, such as gestures, such as the volume at which one speaks, we have a problem. A white man today thought it prudent to tell me that what he said to me was not a microaggression. And I said outright, you don't get to decide that. And it wasn't an op. Okay, I'm going to read up to the middle of this page and then I'm going to stop for today. This attempt would have been impossible had it also not been believed, in classic empiricist terms, that the mind and body were interdependent. Reality is both determined originally by a given set of geographical, biological, and quasi-historical conditions. From this set, which was not available to the native for discovery or introspection, there was no subsequent escape. The antiquitarian basis or bias of Orientalists was supported by these empiricist ideas. In their studies of quote-unquote classical Islam, Buddhism, or Zoroastrianism, they felt themselves, as George Eliot's Dr. Casaubon confesses, to be acting like the ghost of an ancient wandering about the world and trying mentally to construct it as it used to be, in spite of ruin and confusing changes. Like, can we not infantilize people? Please. Can we just not? All right, and that is where I'm going to stop for today. Hey, we just hit the 1 hour mark. And so, Twitch and YouTube, I'm going to say goodbye to you, and I shall see you tomorrow, where we are going to be continuing with, no, not that one. That one. Abolition Feminism Now. So I shall see you then. Twitch and YouTube. Bye-bye. And